For this week, I had chosen a different sutta than the one that I ended up selecting. Instead, one that I just finished yesterday translating, and it's and I haven't yet uploaded it, recorded it, that is. But nevertheless, I wanted to use that sutta, meaning this one, because of the theme. It involves the story, an event that took place that we often hear about in the history of the Dhamma. What I'm referring to is that incident where a man comes scolding and swearing at, using foul language, making accusations, while pointing the finger at Lord Buddha himself. That's the sutta that we will be discussing today. It's the Akkosa Sutta, Akkosa, and it comes from the Samyutta Nikāya, Connected Discourses, which we are quite familiar as to the structure, I think. They're connected thematically, unlike the other Nikāyas, other collections of discourses. This comes from the first group of the Samyutta, the Connected Discourses, and it's the one where we have a series of, yes, there are verses, but in this series of suttas, which comes from the Arahanta Vagga, individuals' incidents or encounters with Lord Buddha where they were arahants at the end of that discourse. So they've collected it under the arahant setting, but it is from the first major collection, and that is the Sagata Vagga, which involves verses. And Gatha is in there, Sagata Vagga. So in the sutta, we see an individual, a Brahmin, who are and were at the time of the Lord Buddha, the elite or the top echelon of Indian society, according to Lord of Manu, law of Manu that they still follow along very, I think, strictly, I think, to a great extent. In this modern age, it's still ongoing, the caste system. So Brahmins were at the top. And here we have an individual who's a Brahmin. And we also know that this is happening somewhat near the beginning of the sasana, near the earlier stages of the Buddha's dispensation, where he began teaching the Dhamma, and where individuals were coming, listening, and then seeing that this is the real teacher I've always looked for. We've heard about in the Vedas. He's the living embodiment. So they would ask questions, and they would get their responses. But there's a certain response that people typically would get, meaning the responses to their verbal questioning. Their intellectual curiosities get to be appeased. And that's one way of, excuse me, of respecting someone as being the genuine article, as they say, the real deal. That's one way, which is the way of the philosophers and scholarly types. So it's all heady. And then there's the one that's that involves a lot of the fuzzy feeling around the heart, when you see someone, and that has a lot to do with the clout, the aura of the person that you are addressing. We're trying to find out as to, are they really saintly? Are they really the true spiritual person? Are they really, an arahant? Usually people are looking for ways to emotionally react to whatever input that they're getting. These two are very base, very inferior in being used as a rubric, as a standard, as a way to identify whether someone really is who they claim to be, or who their students are claiming their teacher supposed to be. Here we're going to see a different quality, one that is very much based on facts, practicality, real life. Specifically, I'm referring to behavior. You've heard me many times saying the statement, the phrase, trust the behavior, not the words. Not the words. The behavior says it all. In the Akkosa Sutta, which you've heard me mention so many times from the Majjhima Nikāya, you see Lord Buddha mentioning so many times of not judging a book by its cover, in a sense, specifically in reference to monks who look like, behave like, at least initially, let's say, especially when they don't have resources, not just monks, not just bhikkhus, but anyone, any specifically teacher, who might look or behave in a certain way. Even the behavior, basically, that's what I'm referring back to here. The behavior can also be pseudo-real, meaning not real, unless he says give it some time, such as behavior of a person who says that they don't want anything, or they're not affected, influenced by money, for example, or by having a following, or by being very, very saintly, quiet type, pure, basically. Unless that person does get money, he says, unless that person does get the following, and you give them some time. And then you come back to look at them, and then you are able to adequately make a conclusion as to what you're observing, but not initially. So we have all these different reference points, right? Perspectives given to us by Lord Buddha's teachings in the Dhamma, where we have a reference point to see and to not just judge, but to quantify and qualify, especially qualify the behavioral patterns or the behavior of a teacher, especially when it comes back to Lord Buddha himself. So in this sutta, we see this person, a Brahmin, who comes very upset to Lord Buddha because he had been hearing that town after town, village after village, city after city, royal city, the Brahmins were relinquishing their ancestral traditions, especially those that were known, well known, or even with a huge following, respectively, each of them. And they were becoming, they were going forth in the Buddha's dispensation. They were asking for going forth. They were taking Lord Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha as their refuge. And then many of them were then requesting the going forth, the Pabbaja, which means to become a monastic. And then they were becoming arahats after some serious practice. But what happened to that ancestral pedigree, heritage. So for many Brahmins, it's like you're selling out. So they started looking not at these individuals, but they looked at what's the common denominator? Who is causing this problem for us? That was the whole schema functioning. So you have different individuals. The one that we came across, I think it was last year or the year before, Vaseta Sutta, where a Brahmin in the village of Vaseta, he was the most highest ranking Brahmin. He comes in and he has an interaction with Lord Buddha, similar one, but not as abusive as we're going to see here. And because the news was flying fast. So many Brahmins were very ambivalent, to say the least. They're very apprehensive, in fact, standoffish. Unlike if you were talking about a Brahmin like this one, who takes it very personally, and he comes attacking Lord Buddha. And this is where we're going to see Lord Buddha's behavior. This is that incident that we often have heard teachers or in different books on Buddhism or about Buddhism, where we see what a teacher is supposed to do, who's mature and developed. So that's kind of like the background. So this comes from the Sagata Vagga, as I mentioned, and it's Sutta number 7.2 from the Samyutta Nikāya, Akkosa Sutta, the verbal abuser. Let's begin. Once the Blessed One was living in Rajagha at the Bamboo Park Monastery, where the squirrels used to come to feed. It was then that a Brahmin, who was known as the grumpy and brutish Bhāradvāja, came to hear about a certain member of his Brahmin Bhāradvāja family, who had in fact gone forth by leaving behind his household life and taking the vows of a monastic in the presence of the Blessed One, the recluse Gautama. So, in wanting to show his anger and displeasure about this matter, the Brahmin went and approached the Blessed One as he began hurling insults, using foul language, while verbally attacking and trying to abuse the great teacher with crude and harsh accusations. Then, once he had finished spewing all that negativity, the Blessed One spoke by saying this to the Brahmin. Well, before I get into that, there is an accepted formula to this day in India, especially in the Brahmin tradition, religious tradition, where a portion of one's life is dedicated to learning, studying the Vedas, or going and learning the family's craft, and basically making money, knowing how to earn a living. The second portion of one's life involves getting married and having children. Getting married and having children. Usually that would, excuse me, cover the span of about 40 years already or more. And then comes the third portion of a Brahmin's life. And that involves, if they choose to, of course, to go off and live the life of an ascetic. This is one of the special qualities that we find uniquely in India, based on my research, at least, where the culture is very accepting and even inviting of this potential or possibility for a person, usually a male, to live like that with these three portions. But you have fulfilled your duties to your caste, to your culture, to your city, to your ancestors, etc. And then, because you've done, you have your family, you have your children, you've raised them, and so you have given them their inheritance, and then you're off to search for basically God or something like that. to attain moksha, liberation, freedom. So this was acceptable. But in this case, what the Brahmins were doing, whoever were coming and listening to Lord Buddha, many of them were much younger than that third, the latest portion of their lives. So it had not reached that point yet. They were just starting out in life, and they were giving it all up. If you recall, just like Venerable Ananda, Venerable Sariputta, Venerable Mahamoggallana, these were coming from the top echelons of society. Everything was set up for their success financially in the world. It's just like the case was with Siddhartha Gautama. So this was creating a schism within the society of the Brahmins, at least. Brahmins and the Khatriyas, of course, in the case of Siddhartha. So it wasn't like they were against living the religious life, no, but the mechanism. And also comes the teachings. Because this was a different lifestyle, totally unfamiliar to them. They had the Vedas. Lord Buddha didn't give them any Vedas. He gave them real life to measure, to weigh, to understand, and to develop through. That's what's called Vijacharana, the development of higher knowledge and understanding and proper conduct. So let's see what Lord Buddha says here. So he just came in, the Brahmin, and by the way, it's the Bhāradvāja family. Bhāradvāja, you will hear this last name. It's basically a branch of Brahmanic, clans. So they're very much, you hear often in the suttas, you see it again and again. In fact, within this collection of suttas, I think there's about 10 of them in this book, in the Arahanta Vagga, you have one Bhāradvāja member of that family after another, after another, after another, showing up, and in different cities. So it's interesting how the compilers of the suttas decided to put all the Bhāradvājas together in one group. But we don't know whether they are brothers to each other or uncles and things like that. But it's big, highly probable that many of them knew each other. But here, because the way to distinguish between these different Bhāradvāja Brahmins that show up in this collection of suttas, one after each other, or one after another, back to back, each one of these Bhāradvāja Brahmins has been given a nickname by their families. So this one is the cantankerous one, or the insulting, abusing, the surly, moody, upset and angry, rageful Bhāradvāja. So eventually there's the other suttas. You will see the matted hair Bhāradvāja. You have a number of those. You have the purified Bhāradvāja. You have the resentful Bhāradvāja. So just to give you, contextual clarification, or as to how to localize this sutta itself in the body of the discourses. Anyhow, so Lord Buddha's response. Brahmin, what would you say to this? Have there ever been times where individuals like friends or family members, acquaintances, companions, or guests might come to pay you a visit? Yes, Master Gautama, there have been such times, replied the Brahmin. You can almost hear him getting ready for an attack. For someone who is so abusive, you do not engage intellectually with them. They're there to destroy you. They're there to attack you. They're there to use anything that comes out of you, whether it's words, behavior, expressions, to, offload 10 times worse of an attack and blame you for it. And the Blessed One continued, then, on such occasions, would you find yourself serving those people who come to visit you various kinds of foods and drinks, providing them with whatever they might enjoy receiving from you while on their visit to your home? Do you give them anything at times when these guests come? Typically, that's a very well, it's dying, that tradition. I've seen it all around the world. I thought initially it was only in Asia, but I've been to other parts of the world. You offer them something when someone comes to your home. So that's but in some cases people would really go, I wouldn't say extremes, but they really would be generous with giving. Sometimes they would have things prepared to give them, actual like gifts, presents, plus the food that would be prepared, plus the tea or coffee that would be prepared when these guests arrive. So that's what we can understand Lord Buddha to be saying here, asking him. And Bhāradvāja's response is this: yes, Master Gautama, there have been many times when I served and provided them with such things, replied the Brahmin. And here's Lord Buddha's follow-up. But what would happen, Brahmin, if despite you offering and providing them with those things, they refuse or decline receiving them altogether? To whom would those things then belong? That gift, that food. Maybe you put too much, sugar in that tea or no sugar, and you have no sugar. Or you offered something and the person sees it and is like, yeah, thank you, puts it down. They're not going to take it with them, are they? What do you do with that gift that you gave? The person still, by the way, the Bhāradvāja character here, I don't think he gets it as to where Lord Buddha is going with this question. He's still thinking about gifts, actual gifts to guests of his. Here's going to be more interesting things coming up. In that case, Master Gautama, I would presume they would have to come back to me, those gifts. Those offerings, not having been accepted, would then still be mine. Brahmin, while you have come here barraging us with your foul language, hurling insults and verbally attacking and trying to abuse us with your crude and harsh accusations, well, in just the same manner, we also refuse and decline receiving those things you came to offer altogether. Thus, whatever you brought with you to us here in our presence, we reject, Brahmin. How many people do you know are able to do that? How many politicians? How many encounters we have in our own surroundings, whether it's work-related, family, etc. We're living at the edge of our seats often. We're going in fully loaded, like a gun that's fully loaded and cocked, is ready to be, the trigger to be pulled. We're just looking for something to trigger us, some catalyst, and we blow up. And it's unfortunate that the whole planet, to a great extent, has become infiltrated or infected by this way of thinking. All that anger and hatred you offered us, Lord Buddha continues, not being received, is still yours to keep. They all still belong to you. You can almost hear Niagara-like falling of this huge ego of Bhāradvāja. How do you respond to this? He did not get the reaction he wanted. What is he going to do? He's going to go ahead and now attack him more. Well, that would really make him stand out as the brute, because there might have been other Brahmins with him. But there was no retaliatory, reactionary action coming from this man whom he came to abuse. And he did abuse him. I've once read a story of from Taoism. Years ago, I read this. It stuck with me. It's beautiful. It has to do with Chuang Tzu, one of the Taoist teachers in ancient times, and it was titled "The Empty Boat." You might have heard me mention it before, but there's a man who's rowing a boat in the middle of a lake, I guess, and he's having a nice siesta, a nice quiet time all on his own. Let's say he's not even rowing, he's sitting there probably lounging on his tiny little boat in the middle of this beautiful scenery, if you can imagine. Maybe there's even some fog on the surface of the lake, quiet, birds chirping. It's like, this is heaven, this is it, this is true seclusion. And then boom, another boat comes and slams into him. He turns around and he sees there's people in the boat. And he gets angry. He says, what are you, blind? There's all this space. How could you come straight at me, hit me? So there's an exchange of anger, angry words, etc. So that finishes and the other boat goes away. Now, maybe it was the same day or maybe another time, but he's still, again, in that boat, enjoying this lake scenery, quietude, tranquility. And boom, again, there's a boat slamming into his boat. And he gets up, ready to really unleash his fury at the occupants of the boat. And then he sees it's absolutely empty. There's no one rowing the boat. There was never anyone in the boat. It simply had taken off because no one had tied it on the docks somewhere properly. So the boat had just drifted. By chance, it reached him. Bhāradvāja just hit an empty boat. It makes you feel quite foolish because you came in with so much expectation and so much anger, so much fury and rage. How could you get angry at a mirror? And not only that, this mirror is teaching him something, gave him some explanations from his own life, to which he agreed by saying, yes, if my guests don't approve of what I'm offering them, then that belongs to me. So he ended up receiving the insults he was releasing onto Lord Buddha. He embarrassed himself, to say it, put it lightly. After all, Brahmin, Lord Buddha continues, when a person finds himself being subjected to someone else's insults and foul language, being verbally attacked and abused by their crude and harsh accusation, and reacts by doing the same to those accusers, that is, abusing and trying to hurt them in a similar manner, then it means that such a person has taken the bait. They have not only accepted the offering, but ate it as well. Everybody's playing volleyball with hot charcoal in the world today. people are tossing their angry pieces of hot coal at others with whom they don't agree. And they keep tossing it. There's another saying that we find, I think it's from the Dhammapada, where Lord Buddha is discussing rage or being vengeful towards someone. He says, or having a grudge towards someone. It's like tossing a hot coal at someone else, a burning hot coal at someone else. Now, you might be able to hit them, but chances are you might not. But one person definitely got hurt in the process. The one who was doing the tossing, oneself. Because you burned yourself as you held on to it for how long, how many years, who knows. And then you found the opportunity and you tossed it at them. And let's say you do hit them. And now instead of one person, there's two people who are hurt. And it's not going to stop there when that hot coal lands. Look at the situation in the world, especially in a place like the Middle East. People are expecting to extinguish another population. They believe that. How could you, even laws of physics doesn't allow you such a thing. There's no such, if you ever tried to plant mint in a pot, in a garden, try to pull it out after some time. Or some just any weed, any plant, stinging nettle. Just say to yourself, I'm going to make sure the surface of the soil over here is going to stay like that. Nothing's going to grow. Good luck, because there's tiny little sprouts all over the world, the surface of the planet. Seedlings, microscopic in size, that will land, and all of a sudden you're going to have mint and other things growing. Similarly, especially when we are trying to hurt someone else, hurt another's family, eliminate them, commit genocide, so that we can make sure only us, our kind, that we approve of, will live here. It's beyond stupid, beyond silly. It's not even realistic. It goes against, defies the laws of physics, of nature. No energy can be created out of nothing. The first law of thermodynamics. Even science tells us. However, if the person sees someone coming at them with spears and arrows and bombs and things like that, and lies, having persuaded the whole planet that they are in the right, well, the action is going to come back to them. For that, we have karma, and no one escapes karma. No one. We often hear about arahants whose actions are no longer following the laws of karma. The actions they commit after awakening are fruitless, are barren of bearing any fruits in the future. Why? Because they have nothing to really hold on to or consider to be dear enough to protect. And that's what we see here. Lord Buddha didn't sit there and say, oh, how could you? I am the teacher of this group of people. I am the head of the Sangha. You, who are you? Coming to me and yelling and cursing at me? No, there was no such thing. And this is another way of understanding the lack in personality view. Sakkaya Ditthi doesn't exist. Of course, Lord Buddha referred to himself as self, this and that, but the idea that I have within me something that is worth defending. In the Kalaha Vivada Sutta from the Sutta Nipata, book of the Fours, Attakavagga, in that there's a wonderful sutta called the Kalaha Vivada. And that is where Lord Buddha addresses several suttas back to back, in fact, on the futility of debating with anyone, arguing with anyone, trying to defend something in front of a fool who doesn't come there to learn something, but they simply are there to argue a point and to win that argument. Why? Because he says nobody walks away from an argument wiser than before. Like the winner of the argument, they're not going to turn wise, and that's why they're called the winner. No, they have just won, however, something else. They have won themselves an enemy. That's what they won, not wisdom. But here, look at what Lord Buddha just did. This is the perfect example of when we have that phrase, adana patinisagga, picking up only to give up. Lord Buddha, yes, saw, heard, but he didn't hold on. There was no upadana. He didn't keep it. He didn't grasp onto it. Oh, you've hurt me. You need to now drop down on your knees, mister, and apologize to me, because I am the teacher. I am the Buddha. I am senior. You have to apologize. No, that would mean that he, as the teacher, had been clenching the idea that there is a me worth defending, holding on to. This is what I was referring to as behaviorally exhibiting, showing what you're really made out of. And he wasn't the only one, of course, like this. His students, Venerable Sariputta, for example, comes to mind. He was also like this, like his teacher, when it came to reacting in a similar manner. He wouldn't do that. When he was assaulted by another Brahmin who came and slapped him in the back of the head, on his back, as he was going on Pindapata, just to prove that Venerable Sariputta was like anyone else. He would get angry and rageful. Venerable Sariputta did not even, he just, was shaken up pretty bad, but he got up and he's like looked around and he's like, okay. And he continued walking. It wasn't like he was a piece of wood, dead wood. No. He knew very well what was happening, but he was watching the mind. That's why Lord Buddha later on, when he was told about this incident, he told those bhikkhus that Venerable Sariputta was like Mother Earth. She accepts everything without any preferences. People throw sewage. People throw vomit, pus, dead bodies, the trash into the oceans, into the water, into the ground. She accepts them completely, unequivocally, just as much as she does accept gold when it's buried. There's no distinction, ultimately. Why? Because the individual in question is not holding on to something that is me, myself. This is who I am. Now, the best litmus test for this is living our life, seeing it in reality. When someone spreads rumors about you, tells lies about you to defend their positions, and as a result of that, you end up not being seen by those individuals as the person you really are. Instead, their heads, their minds, their hearts have been completely sullied and stained by lies. Okay, absolute 100% lies. You don't go around knocking on their door, sending them emails, trying to recapture, trying to pull them back in and say, that was not true because this is this. No, you walk away from that. You walk away from all that, despite the fact that you had spent so much time on those individuals, so much attention you've given, like a mother, like a father to an only child, being there for them. You let them go. If in time they realize their mistakes or they realize the truth as to who you really are, meaning the person that they came to crying, asking for help, and seeing that there was Dhamma in your heart, then they see that again, you're still there, you haven't left, but you didn't go back trying to pull them out from that world. This is something that happened to me personally. Individuals that I really care about as students and things, and you know how much love there was. But you see this happening in the world, even in the world of Dhamma. So what do? You go ahead and start a fight? You go ahead and try to create a schism? No, Lord Buddha says this. Even if you're in the right, you don't go ahead and divide individuals that are together for the sake of truth, because in there's going to be some rooted desire to protect something, some asset, a me, a myself, a lusting after, grabbing these people back. No. That is akusala. We are the inheritors of our actions, Lord Buddha says, our kamma. So here, Lord Buddha is sitting. This man comes, abuses him, and Lord Buddha tells him Dhamma, gives him some Dhamma, especially with his response, which was absolute silence, no retaliation, and then giving him some Dhamma, actual instructions. That the person who responds similarly ends up causing him and the other person more pain, because it doesn't stop, like the case is in the Middle East, as I was saying. They believe that in their books. If somebody pokes an eye, you go and poke their eye. Well, what if they come back and poke the other eye, yours? You go ahead and poke the other eye of theirs. That's what's happening generation after generation. There's so much hatred. Not just in the Middle East, of course. It's not geographic. It's not with particular people only, unfortunately. It's everywhere. So that's what Lord Buddha is addressing here. So, however, that is not the case here, for we neither accept your offering of insults, nor therefore will you find us reacting to it by offering you a similar treatment. Thus, whatever you brought here, Brahmin, is still yours and yours alone. Then the Brahmin Bhāradvāja continued, addressing the Blessed One, and said, but we have heard even in the king's assembly the following being spoken. Even the recluse Gautama, despite being an arahant, certainly gets upset and loses his temper at times. Now, I don't know which Raja, which king he was referring to. There's no reference to this in the sutta. There's no footnote as to where he might have heard it. But it might be true, because when individuals, people would scrutinize somebody who is in the prominent role of, in this case, a teacher, like Lord Buddha was. Even kings would come and look. So I don't know if this was King Bimbisara, King Pasenadi or something, but King Bimbisara, there was no way, because he was already a noble disciple. He was already a Sotapanna. But let's say it was King Pasenadi. And King Pasenadi, at least in the earlier stages of his relationship with Lord Buddha, he was kind of slow. He was very gullible in many ways. And plus, we don't know if any particular king said this. It might have been in the assembly, the the hall where the king and his counselors were there. And many of the counselors, they were not all Buddhists. They were not students of Lord Buddha or respected him. Many of them were Jains, and so they would pick up. So cherry picking is what I'm referring to. You see this sometimes. Well, how could your teacher be like this? Because I saw him yelling at someone. You know, if you sound a little bit harsh, then you're not a spiritual person. Lord Buddha himself says, if you're going to pull out a very, very fine splinter that's stuck in your skin from working with some, carpentry, what do you need to do? Or walking through the forest? Sometimes it happens. Piece of tiny, thin sliver of wood goes in. You need to use a sharp object. In fact, possibly more sharper than that. So a teacher often has to work with dull-witted students. A teacher has to deal with a lot of moha, delusion, or misunderstanding in the minds of individuals because they were expecting something else. So the teacher has to dislodge them from their ignorance, depending on how big of a potential the student has, how thickly ingrained or concretized is this ignorance of theirs, and the level of compassion that the teacher has in their hearts towards the student, and how dedicated they are to the Dhamma, instead of treating it as a superficial, face value. People today expect the Buddhist monk to be always soft-spoken, pretending like you see them sometimes online on social media. I've seen pictures sent to me or videos of monks that are so like the typical, the image, Hollywood image of what they expect a Buddhist monk to be. Like, yeah, smiling, always smiling, yeah. That's not a Buddhist monk. That's a commercialized version of what they want to sell you. And they've been successful because the masses, Buddhist masses, have come to accept that. If Lord Buddha were here, I said this when I was in Malaysia one time, people were shocked. I said, and I was talking at a temple, a big temple there. I said, if Lord Buddha were to come to the world, let's say, for argument's sake, hypothetically speaking, and he would come to this temple or to any major temple, any temple in the world, a Buddhist temple, people will turn him away, close the door on him. They wouldn't accept him because it's too conflicting with their own worldviews, especially in terms of the Dhamma. You don't have to go far. Even in the earlier suttas, we see this in the Kosambi incident, where monks that saw Lord Buddha, they were his students. They could see his eyes. They could speak to him, basically. That's how fresh their relationship was, like right there, alive, contemporaries. Turning to Lord Buddha, their own teacher who gave them the Dhamma, who gave them the Vinaya, turning to Lord Buddha and saying, we know the Vinaya better than you, Bhante. Please go sit there, old man. We got this. Meanwhile, they were arguing with each other, breaking the Sangha apart. Look at the audacity that human beings develop in them, made out of conceit. So we need to understand that the first person that we need to put in check is ourselves. That's what Bhāradvāja had to do, but he didn't. And now Lord Buddha is putting him in his place by his Dhammic behavior. So this was something that he had overheard about someone saying something. So it's like playing telephone. So it's a false accusation again. And the Blessed One replied in verse by saying to the Brahmin, so the Brahmin had just told him that, oh, even in the king's assembly, they're talking about you being an abuser, a person who gets upset. But that was hearsay. This is a fact. What Bhāradvāja just witnessed was absolutely factual. If any part of that thing that he heard about the king's assembly, talking about Lord Buddha getting upset so easily, if any part, even a single iota of that were true, he would have seen evidence of that, because he just gave Lord Buddha, basically, as they say, he read him the Riots Act, really scolding him. He didn't get a rise out of Lord Buddha. So Lord Buddha now responds in verse. That's why it's in the Sagata Vagga collection. From where would anger sprout for the one lacking its very seed? So if the seed is not there, how could it grow? Earlier I was saying about plants growing, mint, all these things. The seed is there, that's why it grows. Anger is there, that's why it grows. No one's addressing the problem properly in the Middle East or anywhere else. No one's addressing it. No one's having kindness and compassion and honesty and truthfulness to point at the real thing and saying, this is the problem, we have to remove that. Virtue is lacking in society. That's why we're in a decrepit state. Virtue is missing. Let's bring that back and things are going to get better. Not eliminate each other. So from where would anger sprout for the one lacking its very seed? How could abuse or rage come out of the heart of the one who is tamed, following a livelihood that's in complete balance with everything? Someone who is released through the liberation that comes with perfect understanding. The one who is utterly peaceful inside and out, remaining untouched and unaffected throughout by all things that create turmoil for others. Getting angry yourself or enraged at another who has come to hurl at you the flame of bitter spite they've been carrying simply pulls you into the mire, making it even worse for you. After all, refusing to react or getting angry and upset at the one who abuses you guarantees a win for you that's so difficult to secure. I've mentioned at times how I was mentioning to one student, and she had gone, and someone who was mean to her, saying mean things to her, she turned to them and said, I love you too. And the person didn't know what to do with that. They were bitter, but they changed. Suddenly they were like, after a few minutes, they were helping her out. They were, pulling up the chair for her, being kind, all of a sudden being nice. She just healed the other person and herself too. The Dhamma is alive because it is factual. It is immediately effective. You see it immediately, sanditiko. It doesn't take time, basically, like the case is with other things. It's akaliko. This Bhāradvāja, this angry Bhāradvāja's reaction was immediate when he saw Lord Buddha did not respond likewise to him. This was something that was out of the blue for him, outside his worldview. This is not how people react, which brings the person down to their roots, into reality, and they see how fickle and stupid they are, and how mad they were, crazy they were. This is stopping the enemy in their tracks. This because when on seeing another who's full of rage and realizing the bitterness and vile intentions in their heart towards you, you resist the temptation of stepping onto the sharp nails that are now laid in front of you. And instead, you choose to take another path, one that is better for him and for you. In this way, you'd be doing what others cannot do because of your ever-present tranquility of heart, the result of your mindful living. Every time someone comes at you with things to trigger, pull you out of your comfort zone, it's similar to having to step onto a path that's full of rusty nails, all with their jagged, rusty, sharp edges sticking out towards you, where you know wherever you step, you're going to be hurting yourself. But there's usually this driving force, this passionate, lustful, driving momentum behind us that says, well, I'm not going to let him get away with that. If I let him get away with that, then others are going to do the same thing. So no, I'm going to set the record straight and I'm going to go on the attack. Well, that's the problem. Everybody's on the attack. That's why this planet is enraged. There is no balance. Imagine if every tree stood against a blowing wind, the gusts of wind. There won't be a tree left. That's why the bamboo and any tree that has those qualities to say, okay, you're stronger than me, I'm going to bend in the direction that you want me. Because I know that time will pass and there is this thing called impermanence and you're going to go away. It's a gust. It's not going to last more than some seconds. And then I'll be able to stand up again. We don't do that anymore. We have so much at stake, as it were. We're always trying to defend ourselves, defend our position, our values, our opinions, our understanding, our truth. In reality, truth doesn't need defending. Truth is truth. No one can smudge it. Yes, they can come and cover it up like the bright sun gets covered by thick clouds. But the sun is way behind those. The clouds keep moving, and every so often you're going to see the sky clearing up and the sun, wow, it was always there. And that's another reason why Lord Buddha often in the suttas was called kinsman of the sun, relative of the sun, because of his brightness, truth, satya. So satya doesn't need fighting to defend itself. Your behavior that's full of virtue and truthfulness says it all, even though you might not have those things that you had. People might walk away from you because of whatever they have been told. Well, that's just the way things are. But where are you? That's the most important thing. How are you living in relation to the Dhamma? And Lord Buddha says, yet there will always be those who, being unfamiliar with the Dhamma and its noble way of practice, will go on to blindly assume that one is indeed a fool to refuse engaging in a battle of abuse, not realizing that such a wise person is in fact the one who truly heals, not just himself, but his abuser too. What a beautiful way of expressing the truth that Lord Buddha stood for, lived by. So Lord Buddha's response in absolute quiet, non-retaliation towards this Brahmin, Bhāradvāja, the accuser, the verbal abuser, that was sufficient. But he also saw that he had a potential. This distinguishes a true teacher from others that are not, at least not at the level of Lord Buddha. So he gave him plenty of Dhamma, and let's see what happens to Bhāradvāja here. Upon listening carefully to the words spoken by the Blessed One, Bhāradvāja, the Brahmin, fell to his knees and uttered these inspired words. It is excellent, Lord. It is sublimely beautiful, Bhante. This is where he says Bhante. And you know when a person says Bhante, things have shifted in his heart, in his mind. The Blessed One has made the Dhamma clear to me in many ways. I feel as though the Tathagata has turned upright what was overturned, revealing what was hidden, showing the correct path to someone who was lost, as though one were to bring a lamp into the darkness for all those with eyesight to see. Bhante, I go for refuge to the Blessed One, to the Dhamma, and to the Sangha of Bhikkhus. The Blessed One has truly clarified the Dhamma for me, and in such a beautiful way. It feels to me as though the Tathagata sat upright. There's a typo here. This shouldn't repeat. But anyhow, it's a beautiful verse that keeps repeating throughout many countless suttas. I don't feel bothered by repeating it. Bringing a brilliantly burning oil lamp into the darkness for all those with eyesight to see, finally. Bhante, with my hands at my heart in respectful Anjali, I request the going forth in your presence, so that I may lead the holy life in full. Therefore, I also request to receive the higher ordination. This was the same verbal abuser. This is not happening at another time. What compels a person to do a 180-degree shift in personality, in understanding, in behavior? What they have just witnessed. That's what compels a person. Then, not long after his ordination, while living alone and secluded from the crowd, continuing in his training, being withdrawn, diligent, and dedicated to his resolution to attain release, the Venerable Bhāradvāja realized for himself in this very life, and with his direct knowledge, the highest goal of the holy life, for the sake of which good sons of families rightly go forth from home life into homelessness. Thus, he now personally knew and understood with absolute certainty. Destroyed is birth. The holy life is now fully lived. What had to be done is now done and finally completed. There is no more rebirth into any state of becoming. Thus, the Venerable Bhāradvāja also became one of the Arahants. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Lovely suttas. About real people, about real situations, not unlike the ones that we have and we do go through. Can we see ourselves in similar situations, responding in a similar manner? And most importantly, if you do not behave in a similar way the first time, after having wanted or resolved to behave like this, can you be soft enough, understanding enough, and honest enough with forgiveness towards yourself to say, it's okay, I'm going to do it better the next time around, and start working on yourself, and seeing that we still have to work on ourselves. That's really courageous. In another sutta, actually in the Tathagatas, which I was working on last week, one of the Arahants was saying how to make his resolve stronger for practice, what he did was he wore his sati skin tight. Like, it's like you're breathing. It's tighter than your skin upon you. It's not a separate thing that you're applying. No, you're holding it close to you. If you're going to grab onto anything, can you be doing that with your sati? That's the only thing that I see valid enough to be grabbing. You can't even grab Nibbana. The goal of Nibbana is not actually a goal. It can't be a goal forever because it will be a burden. Because even Devadatta had Nibbana as his goal, and let's see what happened. He's in hell. He's going to be there for an entire Mahakappa. So the goal itself does not make the practice noble or not. That's what many people are confused about. We think that the goal itself is sufficient, having the goal and driving towards that goal like an achievement. No, there's something else that's missing. Your daily life, the tiny little habits, the tiny little things, the tiny little actions that you have an opportunity to commit or not. So have the goal in mind of Nibbana, of liberation, of release from suffering, okay. Put it there on the shelf. But come back and inhabit sati, inhabit this body and see how it feels when someone says something mean to you. When you get a terrible or mean or abusive email, what do you do? Do you let that demolish your peace? Or when memories come up, or the practice isn't going so well as you would like. What's happening to you now? That is what we mean by inhabiting the skin, like the skin, inhabiting sati, being mindful. In the Milinda Panya, it's a book that was not part of the original first council compendium of suttas, if you will. It came in later. But it's nevertheless a beautiful collection of suttas that the Theravada tradition has adopted, has taken, along with many others. But there is the encounter between the King Milinda and Venerable Nagasena. King Milinda was one of the generals of Alexander the Great, by the way. Alexander had fallen and died, and so this is happening later in history. And this was near about what we have today, Afghanistan, which was a major Greek capital, major region of the remnants of Alexander's dominion over that part of the world. But he was very smart, very intelligent, and he was very practical. So he had called in the best of the best teachers of different religions, and he would debate with them. And everybody would be defeated by King Milinda. And then he says, what about the Buddhists? Like, don't they have somebody to send me somebody that I can find qualified to sit down and argue? And then now the Buddhist heads, the Mahatheras, were very shaky because they knew they weren't qualified to engage in any kind of debate with him, because they would be defeated, except for Venerable Nagasena, who was recognized as an Arahant. So here you go. Now, why am I saying this? Because wearing sati as if it's your skin. He uses a beautiful analogy. He says, be like a leech. A leech, if you ever heard of a leech or seen a leech is an animal, it's a parasite. It latches onto your skin or any skin of a living, warm-blooded animal. And it sucks, it locks in, it bites, You don't feel the bite because it puts some anesthetic over there, so you won't feel the bite, but it will start sucking your blood. It's a vampire, think of it. But then after it gets its fill, it drops. He says, in your practice of sati, make your sati be like a leech. Don't let go. And it always stuck with me, that image. It's a beautiful image. Can we be that way with our sati? Because if you have that and you're practicing sila proper, you have full awareness of your body, which means when certain emotions show up, you're not interested necessarily with what's happening outside of your body. Lord Buddha was very much aware of whatever was happening in him. Nothing could shake him. He's not agitated. Akuppa ceto vimutti, unshakable tranquility, freedom of the mind, of the heart. But how do you get there? By constantly checking in, being present to the body. So we have to take baby steps in order for us to reach that level. Baby steps. Tolerant steps. I'll stop and see if there are any thoughts, comments, questions you may have. Okay. Let's transfer some merits. Akasatha chabumata deva nagamahindika punyantang anumoditva chirang rakhantu loka sasanam. Akasatha chabumata deva nagamahindika punyantang anumoditva chirang rakhantu desanam. Akasatha chabumata deva nagamahindika punyantang anumoditva chirang rakhantu mamparanti. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. May you all be well. May your practice continuously grow as demonstrated by your behavioral change. That my wish is, my hope is, continues to alter from moment to moment. And sati is the great alchemist within you when supported by the Dhamma. For that to happen, you need to stay truthful to what's happening. Check in with the body. Always come from a place of not strife, but softening the body, softening the heart, softening your eyes, softening your attitude towards yourself, being forgiving to yourself, but knowing that you have some distance to travel. Small, small increments of success, meaning small steps where you do take actions towards the goal. And don't judge yourself for the fact that you haven't yet reached the goal. That's not the point. The destination there, it's very boring if it's not changing you right now. The Dhamma is about the process. The Dhamma is not a goal. Nibbana is not a goal. The Dhamma is a process. Nibbana is a process. It has everything to do with your life. It's not a door that we step in through and boom, we walk into some state of oblivion. Parinibbhuta or, parinibbana. No, it starts here. Lord Buddha, while alive, he was teaching students to attain parinibbana and stay alive. Parinibbana was later mistranslated wrongly by idiots who thought that it's a state that you enter into later, especially after death. No. You have moha after death, animal realm after death, hell realms after death, another life after death. Here is where the action is. Here is where we can truly attain. That should be your real goal. So stay with that. May the Triple Gems blessings be with you, you and your loved ones. May you be healthy, happy, smiling with your hearts, as well as your loved ones, protected and prosperous. Till next time. Sukhi Hod.